Chapter 7, Muhammad Abdullah. The Grey Goose, as the Youth Authority transport bus was affectionately called, rolled through the double Sallyport gates at the youth training school under the watchful eyes of those prisoners who worked in the 500 trade jobs yet behind another chain-link fence. After meeting the security requirements of the last checkpoint, the Grey Goose chugged forward further into the institution. Once this third fence was opened and we rolled through, the expansive sight of the landscape almost took my breath away. I saw the same effect on the faces of a few other prisoners aboard the bus. It looked like a huge college campus, or what I thought a college campus would look like from watching Room 222 on television. There was a standard football field of plush green grass surrounded by a red dirt 440-yard track. On one side of the track sat the bleachers, and behind them was a boxing gym. On the other side stood another huge gym containing Olympic weights and a full hardwood basketball court. Adjacent to this was a swimming pool. After being locked in the concrete confines of South Central all my life, with the exception of youth camp, seeing such open spaces of well-kept grass surrounded by a track, gyms, swimming pool, and bleachers only conjured up beautiful images of college campuses and well-to-do students. But, as with all things, that which looks good outwardly may be horribly ugly within. The well-kept face of YTS was but a facade. But for behind the walls of the gyms and in the 3 units that stood around the outer track like mysterious statues on Eastern Island, corruption of every kind was rampant and for profit. In 1981, the youth training school held 1,200 prisoners. No one under California law could stay in the youth authority past the age of 26. YTS was considered a senior youth authority. In maximum security youth prison, it comprised 3 units, each divided into quarters. Each quarter was subdivided into halves, and each half was again divided into banks, or tiers. Every prisoner was assigned to his own cell. Each cell had a sliding door of solid steel with a small glass window for observation by the staff. The units were organized so as to meet the individual needs of each prisoner as set forth by the diagnostic researcher designated to individual casework. Each unit had 4 companies, all structured alphabetically. Unit 1 housed A, B, C, D, E, F, and GH. AB was for orientation. One had to stay here for at least 2 weeks without going anywhere else but to testing, math, reading comprehension, and so on. If your grade point average was not above par, you were made to go to school. If you did not have your diploma or GED, you had to work half a day and go to school the other half until you got it. CD was where you could be trained in fighting fires and then sent out to do easy time at one of the many youth authority camps. EF was for drug abusers and people who, when sentenced, were specifically ordered by the judge to complete the 12-step program as a requirement for release. GH was for alcoholics with the same pre-sentence or board recommended stipulations in their file. Unit 2, consisting of I, J, K, L, M, N, and OR, was the last unit of specifications. IJ was a medical unit for mentally ill prisoners and prisoners with rape charges or with character defects that had led to the charges and conviction. KL and MN were young companies, young prisoners, even though maximum security material were kept together. OR, better known as The Rock, was the hole, one of the strictest maximum security holes outside the Pelican Bay Security Housing Unit and Marion's MCU. Once on The Rock, you had to practically jump through hoops to get off. Every week a bus came and took prisoners off The Rock and onto a state prison. The Rock loomed as the ultimate discipline for those considered fuck-ups. Whenever we passed The Rock, which was above K&L, we gave sort of a thankful salute. The cool people just nodded respectfully. Unit 3 was considered the unit to be in. ST, UV, WX, and YZ. WX was where all the riders were. It had a reputation for being everything from race riots to football, dope to weightlifting. It sat above ST, which was a regular company, as was YZ. UV was for those in 500 trade. These were the upper class sort of folks. Everyone in UV got paid for their work. They kept the institution clean and functioning properly. Everyone wanted to be in 500 trade. The youth training school also had a huge trade line where everything from upholstery to plumbing was taught. Upon completion of the trade line, one was given a certificate. As with almost every institution, correctional facility, or penitentiary, Chicanos and New Africans were in the majority. In youth authority, one began to learn about the larger prison culture that touched everyone's lives, including the staff who, after being in the institution so long, began to assume some of the characteristics of the prisoners. Lines of race, of national unity that defied political logic and overstanding were clearly drawn in the youth authority, which served as a junior college for the larger University of Prison. The most blatant was that of the Allied forces of Southern Chicanos, Southern meaning any land south of Fresno, with all Americans. The Americans could have white pride, white power, swastikas, lightning bolts, 100% honky, and such tattooed all over them, clearly stating they were stone cold racist, and the Chicanos would be more than comfortable in their presence. New Africans allied themselves with the more cultured Northern Chicanos. The Northern and Southern Chicanos were, and still are, locked in a very serious war. The film American Me illustrates this. So like the warring factions of New Africans, the Chicanos were split by geographical boundaries. What's striking is that the division of the two is signified in colors. The Northern Chicanos, Nuestra Familia or Northern Structure, and Fresno Bulldogs wear red flags. The more numerous Southerners, Mexican Mafia, Southern United Raza, and Southside Government wear blue. The New Africans from Northern California, primarily Oakland, Berkeley, Richmond, San Francisco, and Palo Alto, call themselves 415s, which until recently was the area code for most of the Bay Area. As if the Crip and Blood conflict was not complicated enough, the Crips do not get along with the 415s. Actually, the 415s don't like the New Africans from 213, the Los Angeles area code, but for strategic purposes, they have chosen the Bloods as allies over the Crips. So in youth authority, the ground rules of prison are set. Your friends, your enemies. As a rule, all Americans get along with all North, South, 415, and 213. This, I believe, is because of their minority status in most institutions. Tribalism was most prevalent amongst New Africans who began as one, then split into Crips and Bloods. The Crips, ever the majority, were then plagued, indeed traumatized, by the internal strife of set tripping. There was also struggle within each set for leadership. In prison, beginning in youth authority, sets try to organize themselves on some level to deal with the new complexities of institutionalization. In prison, beginning in youth authority, sets try to organize themselves on some level to deal with the new complexities of institutionalization. With this new quest comes the rise of antagonistic contradictions. Since most leaders were not politically equipped to properly recognize, confront, and resolve the contradictions in organizing the unorganized in relation to the larger society, their efforts usually failed, doomed from the outset, or were aborted in the early stages by those who opted for the old platform of anarchy. This start and stop process of organization was characteristic of most sets there. When I was at YTS, we began our organizing process when our numbers swelled beyond 15. Our critical concern was organizing around the larger reality of the war. I had been reading Mario Puzo's The Godfather and was devising a grand scheme for the set based on the Corleone family structure. Never did I take into account that first and foremost the Italians had a clear sense of who they are. Never did I take into account that first and foremost the Italians had a clear sense of who they were. That is, they understood their heritage and their relation to the world as European people. We, on the other hand, were just Crips with no sense of anything before us or where we were headed. We were trapped behind the veil of culture ignorance without even knowing it. Yet here I was trying to pattern our set after some established people, Europeans at that. My opposition came primarily from Diamond. It got continuously worse in 1983, culminating in my charges of set neglect against Diamond. This prompted a meeting of the entire set. Diamond was exonerated, but after that our relationship never recovered. By this time, I had become very egotistical. My reputation had finally ballooned to the third stage, and by definition, I had moved into the security zone of OG status. My rep was omnipresent, totally saturating every circle of gang life. From Crash to the courts, from Crips to the Bloods, from juvenile hall to death row, Monster Kody had arrived. This, coupled with my newfound curiosity and interest in the mafia-style gangsterism, made me very hard to approach. By 1983, I was physically the second biggest in the institution, second only to an old friend, Roscoe, the Samoan from the Park Village Compton Crips. We were weightlifting partners. He had 21-inch arms and mine were 21 and a quarter. He was bench pressing 510 pounds and I was doing 470. I heard after I left, he went considerably higher, 590 I was told. My size added to the monster image and I capitalized on it at every opportunity. We had planned a righteous gangster ceremony of bloodletting for the year 1983, the year of the 8 trays. But 1983 found the set in shambles. Most of our combat troops were locked up, dead or paralyzed by lack of motivation. We found ourselves compensating for this in YTS by vamping on the 60s. What sped this process up, apart from it being 1983, was the fact that Opie had just been murdered by the Rolling 60s. Caught in a secure driveway trying to climb over a chain link fence, he was hit once in the side and died waiting for an ambulance. We were incensed with rage because, other than Little Spike, who was the darling of the hood, Opie was our sort of mascot. He was always filthy and unkempt, which didn't seem to bother him at all.